The rain fell in sheets over the narrow streets of the old neighborhood, drumming against cracked pavement and rusted fire escapes. In a small apartment on the third floor of a sagging brick building, Elena Moretti sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by silence heavier than stone. The overhead bulb flickered, casting trembling shadows across the walls, papered with decades of memories, faded photographs of her late husband in his Sunday suit, her daughter's wedding portrait, her grandson's. Has children with gap-toothed smiles. Now those smiles were gone, replaced by something harder, something she did not recognize. Elena's hands, gnarled and spotted with age, rested on a stack of papers, bank statements, pawn receipts, the deed to this very apartment, signed over yesterday morning to a man in a suit who did not meet her eyes. Everything she had built in 73 years of life dissolved into cash that now sat in a paper bag beneath the table. $28,000, the exact amount her grandsons owed to men who did not forgive debts. She had raised those boys after her daughter died, Paulie and Dominic, 17 months apart, inseparable since childhood, reckless since adolescence. They had promised her they were working legitimate jobs, warehouse work, deliveries. She believed them because she needed to, because the alternative was a truth she could not face, until the night two men in black coats appeared at her door, their voices polite, but their eyes empty as graves. The debt was due. The boys had borrowed from the wrong people, and now the interest had compounded into something no honest work could ever repay. Elena closed her eyes and heard her husband's voice from across the years. "Lena," he used to say, "there are two kinds of men in this world, those who live in the light and those who own the shadows. Never ever knock on the door of the second kind." But what choice did she have now? The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. Outside, the rain continued its relentless assault. Eleanor stood slowly, her knees protesting, and retrieved her black shawl from the hook by the door. She wrapped it around her shoulders like armor. The paper bag felt impossibly heavy as she lifted it, the weight of everything she had ever owned condensed into crumpled bills. She descended the stairs one careful step at a time, gripping the banister with white knuckles. The building groaned around her, settling into the damp night. On the ground floor, she paused at the entrance, staring through the glass door at the rain-slicked street beyond. Across the road, beneath the glow of a solitary street lamp, a black car idled. She had seen it there before, always at night, always watching. She knew what it meant. She knew who it belonged to. Elena pushed through the door and into the storm. The rain soaked through her shawl within seconds, plastering her thin grey hair to her skull. She crossed the street without looking, without caring. The passenger window of the black car rolled down silently. A man sat inside, middle-aged, with a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen too much death to register surprise. He did not speak. He simply looked at her, waiting. "I need to see him," Elena said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "The Don. I need to see the Don." The man studied her for a long moment, rain dripping from the brim of his fedora. Then he nodded once and opened the rear door. Eleanor climbed inside. The interior smelled of leather and cigar smoke. The seats were soft, luxurious, a world away from the cracked vinyl of her kitchen chairs. The man in the front seat said nothing as the car pulled away from the curb, gliding through the empty streets like a ghost. She clutched the paper bag to her chest and stared out the rain-streaked window, watching her neighborhood disappear into the darkness. They drove for 20 minutes, moving from the crumbling tenements of her world into a different realm entirely. The buildings grew taller, grander. The streets widened and the lampposts multiplied, casting pools of golden light across manicured sidewalks. They passed through an iron gate that opened silently at their approach, ascending a long driveway lined with poplar trees. At the end of the drive stood a mansion, 3 stories of stone and shadow, its windows glowing with warm amber light. The car stopped beneath a covered portico. The driver came around and opened Elena's door without a word. She stepped out into the stillness. The rain was a distant whisper here, absorbed by the canopy of trees. A man in a tailored suit waited at the top of the stone steps, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Moretti," he said, his voice soft and formal. "The Don will see you now." Eleanor followed him through massive wooden doors into an entrance hall that took her breath away. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. Oil paintings in gilded frames lined the walls, depicting scenes of old-world grandeur, Venetian canals, Roman gardens, Renaissance courts. The air smelled faintly of roses and something else, something darker, like incense burned in a cathedral crypt. They walked down a corridor lined with closed doors, each one hiding secrets she could only imagine. At the end of the hall, the man opened a set of double doors and gestured for her to enter. The room beyond was a library, floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with leather-bound volumes. A fire crackled in a massive stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the Persian rugs. Behind a mahogany desk sat a man who did not look up as she entered, the Don. She had never seen him before, but she knew him instantly. He was perhaps 60, his hair silver and slicked back, his suit immaculate. His hands, resting on the desk, were elegant and still. He finished writing something in a ledger, his fountain pen scratching across the page with meticulous care. Only when he had completed the entry and blotted the ink did he raise his eyes to meet hers. They were dark eyes, patient eyes, eyes that had watched empires rise and fall from the shadows. "Mrs. Moretti," he said, his voice a low rumble that filled the room without effort. "Please sit." She moved to the chair across from him, her legs unsteady. The paper bag crinkled in her lap. "I understand you have come to discuss a matter of business," the Don continued, folding his hands before him. "Your grandsons, yes? Paulie and Dominic." "Yes," Elena whispered. "They made a mistake. They are young, foolish, but they are good boys. They borrowed money they could not repay," the Don interrupted gently. "They made promises they could not keep. They gambled, they lost, and now they believe they can hide from the consequences." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I have the money, all of it. Everything they owe." She lifted the paper bag and placed it on the desk. The Don did not look at it. He looked only at her. $28,000, he said. "The price of your home, your possessions, your future. Yes, you would give everything for them. They are all I have left." The Don leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers beneath his chin. The firelight played across his face, revealing depths she could not fathom. "Tell me, Mrs. Moretti," he said softly, "do you know what your grandsons were doing with the money they borrowed?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. She did not know. She had never asked. She had been too afraid of the answer. "They were not gambling," the Don said. "Not entirely. They were trying to buy their way into something, power, respect, a seat at a table where they did not belong." He paused. "They wanted to be like me." The words hung in the air like smoke. "I can forgive the debt," the Don continued. "I can erase it entirely as though it never existed. But there is a price for such mercy, Mrs. Moretti. There is always a price." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "What price?" The Don smiled, a small, sad expression that did not reach his eyes. "Your grandsons will come to me, tomorrow night, alone. We will have a conversation, a private conversation, and after that conversation, the debt will be settled." "What will you do to them?" "I will give them a choice," the Don said. "The same choice I give to all men who knock on my door seeking power. They will choose their own path, and they will live with the consequences of that choice." "Please," Eleanor whispered, tears burning in her eyes. "They are just boys." "Boys become men in the shadows, Mrs. Moretti. It is the only place where transformation is possible." The Don stood, signaling the end of their meeting. "Send them to me tomorrow night. 9 o'clock. They will not be harmed, you have my word." She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But as she rose from the chair, clutching her empty hands, she felt the weight of something terrible settling over her shoulders. The same man in the suit appeared at the door to escort her out. She moved through the mansion in a daze, barely seeing the marble, the paintings, the chandeliers. The rain had stopped by the time she stepped outside, leaving the night air sharp and cold. The black car carried her home in silence. When she climbed the stairs to her empty apartment, she found Paulie and Dominic waiting for her, sprawled on the couch they had slept on as children. They looked up as she entered, their faces tight with worry. "Nonna," Paulie said, standing quickly. "Where were you? We've been calling—" "The debt is forgiven," Elena said quietly, unwrapping her shawl with shaking hands. Dominic's eyes widened. "What? How?" "The Don has agreed to forgive it, but you must go to him. Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. Both of you." The brothers exchanged a glance, something passing between them that she could not read. "What does he want?" Dominic asked. "He wants to talk to you," Elena said. "He said you will not be harmed. He gave me his word." Paulie laughed, a short, bitter sound. "The Don's word, you believe that?" "I believe I had no choice," Elena snapped, her voice breaking. "I sold everything, for you. The least you can do is honor the agreement." The room fell silent. Paulie looked away, his jaw tight. Dominic stared at the floor. "We'll go," Dominic said finally. "We'll go." Elena nodded, too exhausted to speak. She moved to her bedroom and closed the door, collapsing onto the bed still wearing her damp clothes. Through the thin walls, she could hear her grandsons whispering in the living room, their voices low and urgent. She closed her eyes and prayed to a God she was no longer sure was listening. Tomorrow night she would send them into the shadows, and she feared, with a certainty that carved itself into her bones, that they would never find their way back into the light. The day passed like a funeral procession, slow and suffocating. Elena moved through her apartment as though underwater, each action requiring impossible effort. She made coffee she did not drink. She stared at photographs she could no longer bear to see. She listened to her grandsons in the next room, their voices rising and falling in arguments she could not bring herself to interrupt. By late afternoon, Paulie had retreated into silence, sitting at the window and smoking cigarette after cigarette, watching the street below with hollow eyes. Dominic paced like a caged animal, running his hands through his dark hair until it stood on end, muttering calculations and possibilities under his breath. "Maybe it's legitimate," Dominic said for the third time, his voice pitched with desperate hope. "Maybe he really just wants to talk, set some terms, and make sure we understand the rules." Paulie exhaled smoke without turning from the window. "Nobody forgives 28 grand out of kindness, Dom. Nobody. Then what does he want?" "I don't know." Paulie's reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. "But Nonna gave up everything. We don't have a choice now." Elena stood in the doorway of her bedroom, watching them. Her boys. Paulie was 24, tall and lean with their grandfather's sharp features, and dark eyes that had learned suspicion too young. Dominic was 22, broader in the shoulders, still carrying some softness in his face that made him look younger than he was. They had been inseparable once, two halves of the same reckless heart. Now she saw the distance between them, the way Paulie had already accepted something that Dominic still fought against. "You should eat," she said quietly. Neither of them responded. At 7 o'clock they showered and dressed in the only decent clothes they owned, dress pants and button-down shirts that Elena had ironed that morning with hands that would not stop shaking. They looked like boys playing at being men, their collars too stiff, their shoes too worn. Paulie checked his watch. Dominic checked his phone for the 100th time, though no messages waited. At 8:30, Eleanor made them sit at the kitchen table. She served them bread and cheese, cold cuts from the deli, things they barely touched. She poured wine into chipped glasses, a bottle she had been saving for an occasion that would never come. "Whatever he asks you to do," she said, her voice steady now, hardened by necessity, "you do it. You understand? No pride, no arguments. You say yes, and you come home." "Nonna," Dominic began. "You come home," she repeated, gripping his hand so tightly, her knuckles went white. "You promise me." "We promise," Paulie said. The words felt like lies. At 8:50, the black car appeared on the street below. Elena watched from the window as her grandsons descended the stairs, their shoulders squared against invisible weight. The rear door opened. They climbed inside. The car pulled away into the gathering darkness, its taillights glowing like distant embers. Elena sank into her chair and wept. Inside the car, Paulie and Dominic sat in silence. The partition between them and the driver closed and impenetrable. The seats were leather, the interior immaculate. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, something orchestral and mournful. Dominic's leg bounced with nervous energy. Paulie stared straight ahead, his jaw set. "Whatever happens," Dominic whispered, "we stick together. Like always." Paulie nodded once. The car moved through the city with the smooth inevitability of a river flowing toward the sea. They passed through neighborhoods they recognized, then ones they did not. The buildings changed. The streets widened. Money announced itself in manicured hedges and wrought iron gates. When they turned through the gates of the Don's estate, both brothers leaned forward, staring at the mansion rising before them like something from another century. Light spilled from tall windows. The driveway curved through sculpted gardens, where stone fountains stood silent in the darkness. The car stopped beneath the portico. The driver emerged and opened their door without speaking. They climbed out into air that smelled of roses and wet earth. A man in a black suit waited at the top of the steps, his face expressionless. "This way," he said. They followed him through the massive doors into the entrance hall. Dominic's breath caught audibly. Paulie's eyes moved over everything with the careful assessment of someone cataloguing escape routes. The marble floors gleamed. The chandeliers cast patterns of light and shadow that seemed to shift as they walked. The man led them down the same corridor Eleanor had walked the night before, past closed doors that whispered secrets. At the end of the hall, he paused before the double doors to the library. "The Don will see you now," he said, and opened the doors. The brothers stepped inside. The library was warm, the fire crackling with comfortable authority. Behind the desk sat the Don, exactly as he had been the night before, as though he had not moved in the intervening hours. He looked up as they entered, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Recognition, calculation, perhaps satisfaction. "Paulie, Dominic," his voice filled the room like smoke. "Please, sit." 2 chairs had been placed before the desk. The brothers sat, their movements stiff, uncertain. The doors closed behind them with a soft click. The Don studied them in silence, his gaze moving from one face to the other, with the patience of a man who had all the time in the world. Paulie met his eyes. Dominic looked away. "Your grandmother," the Don said finally, "is a woman of extraordinary courage, to sacrifice everything for those she loves. Such devotion is rare in this world." "We didn't ask her to do that," Dominic said quickly. "We never wanted—" "But you did ask," the Don interrupted gently. "Perhaps not with words, but with your actions, with your choices. You knocked on doors you should not have opened. You borrowed from men who do not forget. And when the bill came due, you hid behind an old woman's skirts." Dominic flushed red. Paulie remained still, his expression carved from stone. "We'll pay her back," Paulie said. "Every cent. We just need time." "Time is not what you need," the Don replied. "What you need is understanding. You sought power without comprehending its price. You wanted respect without earning it. You believed you could play in the shadows without becoming part of them." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "I have forgiven your debt," he continued. "Your grandmother's money sits in that bag, untouched. I will return it to her tomorrow. But the debt is not truly erased. It has merely changed form." Paulie's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means you owe me something more valuable than money," the Don said. "You owe me loyalty, service, silence." The word hung in the air like a blade. "For how long?" Dominic asked, his voice small. The Don smiled, an expression both kind and terrible. "That depends entirely on you, on how quickly you learn, on how well you serve, on whether you prove yourselves worthy of the trust I'm about to place in you." "And if we refuse?" Paulie asked. The Don's smile did not waver. "Then your grandmother's sacrifice was for nothing. The debt returns with interest, and I can no longer guarantee anyone's safety." The threat was delivered with such softness, it took a moment to land. When it did, Dominic's face went pale. Paulie's hands curled into fists on his knees. "What would you have us do?" Paulie asked through clenched teeth. "Tonight?" the Don said. "Nothing. Tonight, we simply talk. We establish understanding. Tomorrow you will begin learning what it means to serve this family." He reached into a drawer and withdrew 2 small objects, placing them on the desk. 2 rings, gold bands with a crest worked into the metal, a lion with a crown, surrounded by thorns. "These belong to soldiers who served me well," the Don said. "They are gone now, retired, moved on to other lives, far from here. Their rings are a symbol. Wear them, and you are under my protection. No one will touch you. No one will threaten you or those you love, but you belong to me, your time, your skills, your silence." He pushed the rings forward. "Put them on, and the debt is settled. Your grandmother goes home with her money. You begin a new life. Refuse, and we return to the world as it was yesterday. A world where $28,000 buys only temporary mercy." Dominic reached for a ring with shaking hands. Paulie did not move. "What kind of service?" Paulie asked. "The kind that requires discretion," the Don said. "Errands, deliveries, watching, listening, learning the architecture of this world, so that one day, perhaps, you may build something within it." "You mean crime," Paulie said flatly. "I mean survival," the Don corrected. "I mean understanding that there are 2 sets of rules in this life, one for those who pretend the world is fair, and one for those who see it as it truly is. You have already chosen which world you wish to inhabit. You chose it the moment you borrowed money from my associates. Now I am simply making that choice official." Dominic slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for him. He stared at it, his expression caught between horror and fascination. Paulie looked at his brother, then at the Don, then at the ring on the desk. His jaw worked silently. Finally, he reached out and took it. The metal was warm, almost alive. He slid it onto his finger and felt it tighten, or perhaps that was only his imagination. "Good," the Don said, satisfaction warming his voice. "Now, let us seal this understanding properly." He stood and moved to a sideboard, where crystal decanters gleamed in the firelight. He poured 3 glasses of amber liquid and returned, handing one to each brother before raising his own. "To new beginnings," he said. "To loyalty. To the family you have chosen to join." They drank. The liquor burned going down, smooth and expensive and impossibly strong. Dominic coughed. Paulie's eyes watered, but he did not flinch. The Don set down his glass and returned to his desk. He pressed a button, and somewhere in the house, a chime sounded. A moment later, the doors opened. 3 men entered, each wearing suits as immaculate as the Don's. They positioned themselves around the room, silent as shadows. "These are my capos," the Don said. "Marco, Salvatore, Vincent. You will report to them. They will teach you what you need to know. Obey them as you would obey me." The 3 men nodded in unison. Their eyes were cold, measuring. "Marco will take you now," the Don continued. "There is a room prepared for you. Tomorrow, your education begins." Paulie stood quickly. "Wait, we need to go home. Your grandmother believes you are safe," the Don said, "and you are. But tonight, you will stay here. Consider it hospitality. A gesture of good faith. In the morning, you will return home and begin your work." "But the matter is settled," the Don said, his voice hardening just enough to brook no argument. "Marco." The capo named Marco stepped forward, gesturing toward the door. His face was scarred along one cheek, the tissue puckered and white. He did not smile. "Come," he said simply. The brothers had no choice. They followed Marco from the library, leaving the Don behind with his fire and his books and his knowing eyes. They walked deeper into the mansion, down corridors lined with more closed doors, up a staircase carpeted in deep burgundy. Marco stopped at a door on the 2nd floor and opened it. Inside was a bedroom, large and comfortable, with 2 beds and a window overlooking the gardens. A bathroom adjoined it, stocked with fresh towels and soap. "You will stay here tonight," Marco said. "The door is not locked. You are free to move about this floor, but do not attempt to leave the house. Do not go into any closed rooms. Do not speak to anyone unless they speak to you first. Understood?" "Understood," Paulie said. Marco nodded and left, closing the door behind him. His footsteps faded down the hall. Dominic sank onto one of the beds, staring at the ring on his finger. "What did we just do?" he whispered. Paulie moved to the window, looking out at the darkened grounds. Somewhere beyond those gardens, beyond those gates, their grandmother sat in her empty apartment, waiting for them to come home. "We survived," Paulie said quietly. "That's what we did." "For how long?" Paulie did not answer. He touched the ring on his own finger, feeling its weight. It was not heavy, but somehow it felt heavier than anything he had ever worn. Downstairs, in the library, the Don sat alone with his ledger. He opened it to a fresh page and wrote 2 names in his elegant script: Paulie Moretti, Dominic Moretti. Beneath their names he wrote a single word: acquired. Then he closed the book and stared into the fire, watching the flames dance and consume, thinking of all the men who had sat in those same chairs before, who had worn those same rings, who had made those same promises. Some of them had kept their word, some had flourished, some had died. All of them had changed. The night deepened around the mansion. In their room, Paulie and Dominic lay in the darkness, neither sleeping, both staring at the ceiling and wondering what dawn would bring. In her apartment across the city, Elena Moretti sat by her window, rosary beads moving through her fingers, prayers falling from her lips like tears. The rain began again just after midnight, soft and relentless, washing the streets clean of everything except the truth. Some debts can never be repaid, only transformed into something darker, something that grows in the shadows until it consumes everything in its path. And in the consuming it creates something new, something that wears a ring and speaks in whispers and belongs forever to the night. Dawn came slowly to the mansion, pale light filtering through heavy curtains and painting the bedroom in shades of grey. Paulie had not slept. He had watched the darkness thin and fade, listening to his brother's uneven breathing from the other bed, feeling the weight of the ring on his finger like a shackle. Dominic stirred as the first real light touched the walls. He sat up, disoriented, his hair wild. For a moment he looked young again, like the boy who used to wake in their grandmother's apartment, confused about where he was. Then memory returned, and his face hardened. "Morning," Paulie said from the window. "Yeah." Dominic touched the ring on his finger, as though checking to make sure it was real. "You think Nonna slept?" "No." A knock at the door interrupted them. Before either could respond, it opened. Marco stood in the threshold, dressed in the same immaculate suit from the night before, looking as though he had never needed sleep at all. "Breakfast," he said. "Then we begin." They followed him downstairs to a dining room that seemed designed to make ordinary men feel small. The table could have seated 20, its surface polished to a mirror shine. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Oil paintings of severe-looking men in old-fashioned clothes watched from the walls. 3 places had been set at one end of the table. Marco gestured for them to sit. A moment later, 2 women in black uniforms emerged from a side door carrying platters: eggs, bacon, fresh bread, fruit, coffee in silver pots. The food smelled impossibly good. Paulie's stomach clenched with hunger he had been too tense to feel. "Eat," Marco said, taking the seat across from them. "You will need your strength." They ate in silence, the sound of silverware on china echoing in the vast room. Marco watched them with the patience of a man conducting an experiment, noting everything: how they held their forks, how they cut their food, how many seconds passed between bites. When they finished, one of the women cleared the plates. Marco poured himself more coffee and leaned back in his chair. "The Don has given you a gift," he said. "Do you understand that?" Paulie set down his cup carefully. "A gift that comes with a price." "All gifts do," Marco replied. "But the price could have been much worse. Your grandmother could be mourning instead of merely worrying. You could be at the bottom of the river instead of sitting here eating eggs prepared by a chef who once cooked for diplomats." He paused. "The Don sees potential in you. That is why you are alive. That is why you are here. Do not waste his generosity." "What exactly does he want from us?" Dominic asked. "Loyalty," Marco said simply. "Everything else can be taught. Loyalty cannot. It must be chosen every day and every moment. You wear his ring now, that means his enemies are your enemies. His secrets are your secrets. His word is your law. And in exchange, you become part of something larger than yourselves. You learn skills most men never acquire. You gain access to power, money, respect. You become untouchable." Marco's scarred face shifted into something that might have been a smile. "But more importantly, you survive. And your grandmother sleeps peacefully at night, knowing you are protected." The manipulation was elegant in its simplicity. Tie their compliance to Elena's safety. Make rebellion synonymous with her suffering. Paulie saw it clearly. He said nothing. "Today," Marco continued, "you will meet the organization. You will learn the structure, the rules, the consequences of breaking those rules. Tomorrow, you begin practical work. Simple tasks at first. Deliveries, errands, watching and listening. You will prove yourselves useful, or you will prove yourselves expendable. There is no middle ground." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "Come, the others are waiting." They followed him through the mansion, down a different set of stairs that descended into regions Elena had never seen. The air grew cooler, the light more artificial. They passed through a steel door that Marco unlocked with a key from his pocket, then down another corridor lined with concrete. At the end of the corridor was a large room, windowless and spare. A dozen men stood inside, ranging in age from early 20s to late 50s. All wore suits. All wore rings identical to the ones Paulie and Dominic now bore. They turned as one when the door opened, their faces registering curiosity, assessment, dismissal. "Brothers," Marco announced, his voice carrying authority. "These are the new soldiers, Paulie and Dominic Moretti. They are under the Don's protection. You will treat them accordingly." Murmurs rippled through the group. Some nodded. Others remained motionless. One man, younger than the rest, with slicked back hair and a cruel mouth, laughed softly. "Moretti," he said. "Any relation to Joey Moretti?" Paulie stiffened. "Our grandfather." "Joey Moretti was a coward," the man said, stepping forward. "He talked when he should have stayed silent. Cost this family money, cost it blood." "Enough, Tonio," Marco said quietly. But Tonio did not stop. He moved closer, invading Paulie's space, smelling of cologne and tobacco. "You have your grandfather's eyes. I wonder if you have his spine, or lack of it." Paulie's hands curled into fists. Dominic tensed beside him. The room held its breath. "Tonio," Marco repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "Enough." Tonio held Paulie's gaze for another moment, then smiled and stepped back, just making sure they understand their place. "Their place is beside you," Marco said. "As soldiers in this family, the Don has accepted them. You will accept them, or you will explain your objections to the Don personally. Would you like me to arrange that conversation?" Tonio's smile vanished. "No. Then we are clear." The tension eased, but did not disappear. Paulie could feel the weight of eyes on him, measuring, judging, waiting for him to fail. He forced his hands to unclench. Marco spent the next 2 hours explaining the architecture of the organization. There were soldiers like them, lowest tier the muscle and the messengers. Above them the capos, each commanding their own crew. Marco, Salvatore, Vincent. 3 capos, 3 crews, each responsible for different territories and operations. Above the capos sat the underboss, a man named Giuliano who controlled the day-to-day operations, while the Don focused on strategy and diplomacy. They would meet him later, Marco said. He was not a man to be kept waiting, and above them all, the Don. Absolute authority, final word, judge, jury, and executioner. You do not question orders, Marco said. You do not freelance. You do not speak to outsiders about family business. You do not steal from the family. You do not betray the family. Break any of these rules and you will disappear, not arrested, not beaten, disappeared, as though you never existed. Am I understood? Yes, they said in unison with the other soldiers. Good. Marco gestured to a table at the side of the room where phones sat in neat rows. Each of you will receive one of these. Encrypted, untraceable. You answer when it rings. You respond to messages immediately. You keep it with you always. It is your only connection to this world. Lose it, and you lose everything. He handed Paulie and Dominic each a phone. They felt heavier than they should, dense with implications. Tonight, Marco continued, you will return to your grandmother. You will tell her you are working for the Don, but you will not discuss details. You will tell her you are safe. You will visit her regularly. She will receive a monthly stipend, $5,000, as compensation for her sacrifice. This money comes from the Don's personal account. It is a gift. She will not refuse it. Dominic's eyes widened. 5,000 per month, Marco confirmed, for as long as you serve faithfully. Should you betray this family, the money stops. And so does her protection, the carrot and the stick, perfectly balanced. For the rest of the day, they learned the territories, which neighborhoods belonged to which crews, which businesses paid tribute, which politicians had been bought, which police officers looked the other way. They learned the codes, how to speak on the phone without saying anything actionable, how to recognize undercover cops, how to move money without leaving traces. They learned about the rules of silence, omerta, the code that bound them all. Speak to law enforcement, and you forfeited your life. Betray the family, and your family suffered the consequences. Simple, absolute, enforced without mercy. At noon, they were fed again, sandwiches and coffee in the same basement room. The other soldiers ate quickly, speaking in low voices about jobs and territories and women. Tonio sat apart, cleaning his nails with a pocket knife, occasionally glancing at Paulie with open contempt. In the afternoon, they met Salvatore, a capo in his 50s with grey hair and gentle eyes that saw everything. He taught them how to conduct a collection, how to be firm without being cruel, how to recognize when someone was truly broke versus merely stalling, how to report back with accuracy. You are the face of this family, Salvatore said. When you knock on a door, you represent the Don. Act accordingly, be professional, be respectful, but be clear. Debts must be paid, always. Vincent, the third capo, was younger and harder, with knuckles scarred from fights and a voice like gravel. He taught them about security, how to watch for tails, how to sweep a room for listening devices, how to recognize when a situation was about to turn violent. Trust your instincts, Vincent said. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Better to walk away and report than to end up dead trying to prove you are brave. By evening, Paulie's head ached with information. Dominic looked pale, overwhelmed. They were taken back to their room to rest before dinner. This time, when Marco left, he did not remind them not to leave. The threat was understood. Paulie sat on his bed and stared at the phone in his hand. It buzzed once, making him jump. A text message appeared. Report to the library at 8 p.m. The Don wishes to speak with you. He showed it to Dominic, who had gone even paler. What does he want now? Dominic whispered. I guess we will find out. At 8 o'clock exactly, they descended the stairs and made their way to the library. The doors stood open. The Don sat behind his desk, reading a leather-bound book by the light of a green-shaded lamp. He looked up as they entered and set the book aside. Paulie, Dominic, please, sit. They sat. The fire crackled. The Don poured 3 glasses of wine and handed 2 across the desk. You have had a long day, he said. How do you feel? Tired, Paulie admitted. Overwhelmed, Dominic added. Good, the Don said. That means you are paying attention. Tell me, What have you learned? Paulie spoke carefully. That this organization is larger than we realized, more complex, more dangerous, and that leaving it is not an option. The Don smiled, very perceptive. You are correct, of course. Once you wear the ring, you wear it for life. There is no retirement in this family, only service or death. I tell you this not to frighten you, but to clarify your circumstances. You are mine now, completely. Dominic shifted in his seat. What about our grandmother? She will be cared for, the Don said, as I promised. In fact, I have already arranged for the first payment to be delivered tomorrow. She will receive it along with a letter, explaining that you are working for a legitimate business, a consulting firm, and that your salary includes a stipend for her. She will believe this, because she needs to believe it. Do not disabuse her of this notion. So we lie to her, Paulie said flatly. You protect her, the Don corrected. The truth would only bring her pain. This way, she can sleep at night. She can believe her grandsons are safe and successful. Is that not a kindness? The logic was poisonous, but Paulie could not refute it. Tomorrow, the Don continued, you will return home for 2 days, spend time with your grandmother, reassure her, then you will return here and begin your real work. Marco will assign you to his crew. You will start with simple collections. If you prove competent, you will be given more responsibility. If you prove exceptional, you may rise. There is no ceiling in this family for those who earn their place. He raised his glass. To your future, may it be long and prosperous. They drank, the wine bitter on their tongues. An hour later, the black car carried them through the night back to their grandmother's apartment. They rode in silence, watching the city slide past the windows, transforming from the world of mansions and power back into the world of cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights. The car stopped outside their building. They climbed out, and it drove away immediately, disappearing around the corner. Upstairs, the lights were on. They climbed the stairs slowly, rehearsing lies, preparing smiles. Paulie knocked softly on the door. It opened instantly. Elena stood there, her face ravaged by sleeplessness and tears. When she saw them, she let out a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh and pulled them both into her arms. You are alive, she whispered. Thank God you are alive. We're fine, Nonna, Dominic said, his voice thick. Everything is fine. They went inside. She made them sit at the kitchen table while she heated soup and sliced bread and poured wine with shaking hands. They ate, and she watched them as though afraid they might vanish if she looked away. What happened? She finally asked. What did the Don say? Paulie set down his spoon. He forgave the debt. Completely. But we are going to work for him. Legitimate work. A consulting firm. The pay is good. Part of our salary will come to you, 5,000 a month. Elena's eyes widened. 5,000? It is already arranged, Paulie continued. You will receive the first payment tomorrow. You do not need to worry about money anymore. About anything. She looked between them, searching their faces for lies. Paulie held her gaze steadily. Dominic looked down at his soup. This is real work? She asked quietly. Not, it is real, Paulie lied. We are just assistants. Runners, nothing dangerous. The Don is a businessman. He needs people he can trust, that is all. Elena wanted to believe. Paulie could see it in her eyes, the desperate need to accept this story, to convince herself that her sacrifice had not damned her grandsons to a life of darkness. Finally, she nodded. Then I am grateful. To him, to God, to whatever brought you home safely. That night, Paulie lay in his old bed in his old room, staring at the ceiling that had watched over his childhood. The ring on his finger caught the streetlight coming through the window, glinting softly. In the next room, he could hear his grandmother praying, her voice a whispered litany of thanks and desperate hope. He closed his eyes and felt the weight of everything settle over him like a burial shroud. They had survived. But what they had become in the surviving, he was no longer sure. 3 months passed like water through cupped hands, too quick and too slow at once. Paulie and Dominic moved between two worlds, the daylight world of their grandmother's apartment, where they played at being legitimate businessmen with briefcases and schedules, and the shadow world of the Don's empire, where they learned what it meant to collect debts that could never be fully repaid. The first collection had been simple. A restaurant owner in Little Italy, 2 weeks behind on his protection payment. Marco had gone with them, standing silent in the doorway while Paulie repeated the words he had been taught. Polite, professional, inevitable. The man had paid immediately, counting out cash with trembling fingers, apologizing for the delay. His wife had been sick. Medical bills. He would never be late again. Marco had nodded, and they had left. The money in a zippered bag that went directly to Salvatore for counting and recording. That night, Paulie had dreamed of the restaurant owner's hands, the way they shook, the way his eyes had gone dark with humiliation. By the second month, Marco no longer accompanied them. They went alone, collecting from a growing list of businesses, delis, barbershops, construction companies, waste management firms. Most paid without protest. A few tried to negotiate. One refused. That one had been a pawn shop owner named Enzo, a wiry man in his 60s with nicotine-stained fingers and a stubborn jaw. He had looked at the brothers with contempt when they arrived, explaining that he owed nothing, that the protection he paid for was worthless, that he was done being bled dry. Paulie had called Marco. Marco had called Vincent. Vincent had arrived 20 minutes later with 2 other soldiers, Tonio among them. What happened next? Paulie tried not to remember in detail. The sounds, the efficiency, the way Enzo's defiance had crumbled into pleas, then into silence. They had left with the money. Enzo had reopened his shop the next day with a broken arm and a new understanding of consequences. The lesson had been administered. The debt had been paid. That night, Paulie had vomited in the alley behind his grandmother's building, Dominic holding his shoulders while he heaved up everything he had eaten. They had not spoken about it afterward. There was nothing to say. They had crossed a line they could not uncross. By the 3rd month, the collections were routine. They knew the routes, the faces, the excuses. They developed their own rhythm. Paulie did the talking, calm and reasonable. Dominic stood behind him, silent and present, his sighs a reminder of what could happen if reason failed. It usually did not fail. People paid. Life continued. The money flowed to Elena like clockwork, $5,000 on the 1st of every month, delivered by a courier in an unmarked envelope. She had tried to refuse the first payment, her pride warring with necessity, but the amount of relief it brought her was undeniable. She could eat without measuring every bite. She could turn on the heat. She could sleep without the constant arithmetic of survival running through her head. She stopped asking questions. Paulie told himself this was mercy. On a cold evening in late autumn, the encrypted phone buzzed while they sat at dinner with Elena. Paulie glanced at the screen and felt his stomach tighten. Report to the mansion. Immediately. Come alone. Alone. Not both of them. Just him. I have to go, he said, standing. Eleanor looked up from her plate, concern flickering across her face. Is everything all right? Just work, Paulie said, forcing a smile. Someone needs coverage for a late shift. Dominic's eyes met his across the table. In them, Paulie saw the same fear he felt. Be careful, Elena said. Always. The black car was waiting on the street. The drive to the mansion felt longer than usual, each turn taking him deeper into uncertainty. When they arrived, Marco met him at the door, his scarred face unreadable. The Don wants to see you, Marco said. Library. Paulie followed him through corridors he knew by heart now, past the familiar paintings and closed doors. But tonight, something felt different. The air seemed heavier, the silence more complete. The library doors stood open. The Don sat behind his desk, but he was not alone. Standing beside him was a man Paulie had only seen once before, Giuliano, the underboss, tall and lean with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Elena's apartment and radiated authority that made even the Don seem almost human by comparison. Paulie, the Don said, thank you for coming. Please sit. Paulie sat, his heart hammering. He tried to read their faces and found nothing. You have been with us 3 months now, the Don continued. Marco tells me you have performed adequately. No complaints, no mistakes. You follow orders. You keep your mouth shut. These are valuable qualities. Thank you, Paulie managed. However, Giuliano said, his voice smooth as silk over steel, adequacy is not excellence. And excellence is what this family requires to survive. Paulie said nothing, waiting. We have a task for you, the Don said, more complex than collections, more sensitive. If you succeed, you demonstrate that you are worthy of greater trust. If you fail, you demonstrate that our faith in you was misplaced. He opened a drawer and withdrew a folder, sliding it across the desk. Paulie opened it. Inside were photographs, documents, addresses. A middle-aged man with thinning hair and soft features, Anthony Castellano, a name Paulie did not recognize. Anthony runs a gambling operation in Brooklyn, Giuliano explained. He pays tribute to the Lucci family, has for years. Recently he has been seen meeting with federal agents. We need to know what he is saying. We need to know if he is cooperating. Paulie looked up. You want me to ask him? No, the Don said. We want you to watch him, follow him, document his movements. Who he meets, where he goes, what he does. You will report everything to Marco. Do not approach him. Do not let him know he is being watched. Simply observe. For how long? Until we tell you to stop. Giuliano's cold eyes held his. This is not a collection. This is intelligence work. It requires patience, discretion, the ability to see without being seen. Can you do this? Paulie thought about refusing, about saying he was not qualified, not trained for surveillance. But he knew what refusal meant. He knew what happened to soldiers who failed tests. I can do it, he said. Good. The Don closed the folder. You will begin tomorrow. Marco will provide you with equipment, cameras, recording devices, a vehicle. You will work alone. Do not discuss this task with your brother or anyone else. Do not keep written notes. Report only to Marco, verbally. Understood? Understood. One more thing, Giuliano said, leaning forward slightly. If Castellano is cooperating with law enforcement, he will be dealt with permanently. What you are doing now is determining whether that dealing is necessary. The information you gather may save his life, or end it. Carry that responsibility carefully. The weight of it settled over Paulie like a stone. They were not just asking him to watch a man, they were asking him to decide whether that man lived or died. He left the mansion an hour later with the folder, a bag of equipment and instructions that felt like a death sentence wearing his name. The car took him home. He climbed the stairs to find Dominic waiting in the hallway, unable to stay inside, pretending everything was normal. What happened? Dominic whispered. Paulie shook his head. I cannot talk about it. Paulie, I cannot. He met his brother's eyes, letting him see the fear there. Trust me, please. Dominic stepped back, hurt and confusion warring on his face, but he nodded. Okay. Inside, Elena had already gone to bed. Paulie went to his room and spread the contents of the folder across his mattress. Photographs of Anthony Castellano at various locations, a social club, a restaurant, his apartment building, addresses, known associates, federal courthouse timestamps. He studied the images until they burned into his memory, then returned everything to the folder and hid it under his mattress. Sleep did not come. He lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the invisible line between watching a man and condemning him to death. The next morning, he collected the equipment from a lockup in Queens. The bag contained cameras with telephoto lenses, audio recording devices disguised as pens and watches, a tablet with tracking software, and keys to a nondescript grey sedan parked 2 blocks away. He spent the next week learning to be invisible. He followed Castellano through Brooklyn, maintaining distance, blending into crowds, documenting everything. The man was cautious but not careful enough. He varied his routes but fell into patterns. He met with the same people at the same locations: his gambling operation, his mistress's apartment, his mother's house in Bensonhurst, and twice he went to a diner near the federal courthouse, sitting alone at a back booth, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. Both times, a man in a cheap suit arrived 30 minutes later, sat at the counter, ordered breakfast, left an envelope beneath his napkin, and departed. Castellano would wait 10 more minutes, then collect the envelope and leave. Paulie photographed it all: the meetings, the envelope exchanges, the timing. He recorded the federal agent's license plate and ran it through contacts Marco provided. FBI, Organized Crime Task Force. The evidence was damning. Castellano was not just meeting with feds. He was receiving payments. He was an informant. After 2 weeks, Paulie delivered his report to Marco in a parking garage downtown. They sat in Marco's car while Paulie explained everything he had seen, showing photographs, playing audio recordings of conversations captured from outside Castellano's gambling den. Marco listened without expression. When Paulie finished, he gathered the materials and placed them in a briefcase. You did well, Marco said. The Don will be pleased. What happens now? Paulie asked, though he already knew. Now we verify your information. If it is accurate, the situation will be resolved. Resolved, Paulie repeated hollowly. Marco looked at him, something almost like sympathy flickering in his hard eyes. You understand what you have done here, yes? You have protected this family. You have identified a threat before it could do real damage. That is valuable. That is the kind of work that earns trust. I helped you decide to kill a man. You helped us decide to remove a cancer before it spreads, Marco corrected. Castellano made his choice when he started taking federal money. He knew the consequences. This is not on you, but it was. Paulie could feel it, settling into his bones, becoming part of him. He had pointed at a man and said, "This one is guilty," and now that man would cease to exist, erased from the world as cleanly as a name crossed off a ledger. 3 days later, Anthony Castellano disappeared. His car was found abandoned near the waterfront. His gambling operation was taken over by one of the Don's crews. His mistress stopped crying after a week. His mother held a funeral with an empty casket. The newspapers called it a mob hit, likely retaliation for unpaid debts. The FBI opened an investigation that would go nowhere. Life continued. Paulie received a bonus, $10,000 in cash, delivered in an envelope with a note in the Don's elegant handwriting. "Well done. You have proven yourself valuable." He gave half to Elena, telling her it was a performance bonus from work. She cried with gratitude and insisted on taking him and Dominic to dinner at the restaurant where she used to work, before arthritis forced her to retire. They sat at a corner table, and she toasted to their success, to their future, to the mysterious consulting firm that had saved them all. Paulie drank and smiled, and felt the weight of Castellano's death pressing against his chest, like a hand closing around his heart. That night, he stood at the window of his bedroom, staring out at the street where the black car sometimes waited. Dominic appeared in the doorway holding 2 beers, offering one without speaking. They drank in silence for a long time. "It is getting easier, isn't it?" Dominic finally said. "The work, the lies, all of it." Paulie nodded slowly. "That is what scares me most. Do you think we can ever get out?" Paulie touched the ring on his finger, feeling its familiar weight. "No, I do not think we can." "Then what do we do?" "We survive. We protect Nonna. We become so valuable they cannot afford to kill us." He turned to look at his brother. "And we never ever forget what we have become." Dominic's eyes were dark with understanding. "And what have we become?" Paulie did not answer. The silence answered for him. Outside, the city hummed with life. Somewhere another debt was being collected. Another envelope was being exchanged. Another name was being written in a ledger that balanced blood against loyalty, fear against obedience, survival against the slow erosion of the soul. The brothers stood together in the darkness, wearing their rings, carrying their secrets, bound to a family they had not chosen but could never leave. And the Don, in his mansion of marble and shadows, added 2 more names to his private ledger, not in the column marked acquired, but in the one marked invested, because men who proved themselves once could be asked to prove themselves again, and again, and again, until they forgot what they had been before the proving began. Winter came hard that year, bringing snow that blanketed the city in false purity, and cold that seeped through walls and coats and skin. 6 months had passed since Paulie and Dominic first wore the rings that bound them to the Don's empire. 6 months of collections and surveillances, of lies told and truths buried, of becoming the kind of men their grandfather would not have recognized. Elena seemed happier now, her apartment warm, her cupboards full, her sleep untroubled by the arithmetic of poverty. She had gained weight, color returning to her cheeks. She talked about visiting her sister in Philadelphia in the spring, something she had not been able to afford in years. She thanked God every morning for the mysterious consulting firm that had saved her grandsons, never noticing the shadows that followed them home each night. But Paulie noticed. He saw them in the mirror when he shaved, in the windows of the buildings he passed, in Dominic's eyes across the dinner table. They were changing, hardening. The work that had once made them sick now felt routine. The lies came easier. The violence, when necessary, no longer shocked them. They had been promoted quietly, moved from Marco's crew to more sensitive assignments. Paulie had become the Don's preferred surveillance operative, patient and precise, capable of watching for weeks without being detected. Dominic had been assigned to Vincent's crew, his size and quiet intensity making him effective at enforcing payments from those who thought they could resist. They saw each other less now, different schedules, different territories. When they did meet, usually at Elena's apartment for Sunday dinner, they spoke carefully, avoiding the subjects that mattered, maintaining the fiction that they were still the boys who had knocked on the Don's door seeking mercy. On a February evening, heavy with snow, Paulie's phone buzzed while he sat in a surveillance position outside a union hall in the Bronx. The message was simple: return to mansion. Urgent. Both brothers. His stomach tightened. Urgent meant trouble. Both brothers meant it involved them specifically. He texted Dominic, who was collecting in Brooklyn. 20 minutes later, they met at a subway station, both pale, both silent. They took a cab to the mansion, neither wanting to wait for the Don's car, as though speed might somehow protect them from whatever awaited. Marco met them at the door. His face was grave. "The Don is in the library," he said. "With Giuliano. They have been waiting for you." The walk down the familiar corridor felt like a march to execution. The library doors stood open, firelight spilling into the hallway. They entered to find the Don and Giuliano standing by the fire, both holding glasses of wine, both wearing expressions that revealed nothing. "Paulie, Dominic," the Don gestured to the chairs before his desk. "Sit, please." They sat. The Don and Giuliano moved to stand before them, backlit by flames, faces half in shadow. "6 months ago," the Don began, "I made an investment in you. I forgave a debt. I brought you into this family. I gave you opportunity, protection, purpose. In return, I asked for loyalty and service. You have had both," Paulie said carefully. "Have I?" The Don set down his glass. "Then perhaps you can explain something that troubles me deeply." He nodded to Giuliano, who produced a folder and opened it. Inside were photographs. Paulie felt his blood turn to ice. The photos showed Eleanor, his grandmother, leaving her apartment, walking to a church, sitting in a pew. And across from her, sitting in the same pew, a man Paulie recognized instantly, Detective Thomas Brennan, Organized Crime Division. They had been briefed on him during training, a relentless investigator who had put away 3 capos in the last 5 years. "Your grandmother," Giuliano said, his voice soft as a knife sliding between ribs, "has been meeting with a police detective 3 times in the last month, always at the same church, always for approximately 30 minutes. Would you care to explain why?" Paulie's mind raced, panic threatening to overwhelm thought. "I do not know. I swear I had no idea she was meeting anyone." "Did you tell her about your work?" the Don asked. "About this family?" "No, never. I told her exactly what you instructed, that we work for a consulting firm, that it is legitimate. She believes it." "Then why is she meeting with a detective who specializes in organized crime?" Giuliano's cold eyes moved between them. What could she possibly have to discuss with him? Dominic spoke up, his voice cracking slightly. "Maybe she is just talking, confessing. She is religious. Maybe she needed spiritual guidance and he happened to be there." "Detective Brennan does not attend that church," Giuliano interrupted. "He is not Catholic. He is not religious at all. He is there specifically to meet with your grandmother. The question is, why?" The implications crashed over Paulie like a wave. If Elena had somehow learned the truth about their work, if she had gone to the police out of fear or conscience, if she had told them anything at all about the collections, the mansion, the Don, then they were all dead. Not just him and Dominic, Elena too. The Don's mercy had limits and they had just discovered where those limits ended. "We need to talk to her," Paulie said quickly. "Find out what she told him. It might be nothing, a coincidence. Maybe he approached her, and she was too polite to refuse. Or," the Don said quietly, "she discovered what you really do, and her conscience drove her to the police. She sacrificed everything to save you, and you repaid her by becoming criminals. Perhaps she could not live with that knowledge." The words cut deeper than any blade, because they might be true. Because Paulie had seen the way Eleanor looked at them sometimes, searching their faces for the boys they used to be, finding only strangers wearing familiar skin. "What do you want us to do?" Dominic whispered. The Don returned to his desk and sat, steepling his fingers. "I want you to discover the truth. Talk to your grandmother. Find out what she knows, what she has said, what promises she has made. Do not lie to her. Do not threaten her. Simply learn the truth, and then report back to me." "And after that?" Paulie asked, though he knew the answer would destroy him. "After that," the Don said, his voice heavy with something that might have been regret, "we will decide what must be done." They left the mansion in a daze, the snow falling heavier now, muffling the city in silence. They took a cab to Elena's apartment and climbed the stairs with legs that felt like lead. Paulie's hand shook as he unlocked the door. Elena sat at the kitchen table, darning socks by lamplight. She looked up as they entered, and her face brightened with the smile that had sustained them through childhood. Then she saw their expressions, and the smile faded. "What is wrong?" she asked, setting down her needle. Paulie pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Dominic stood by the door, blocking it, though he did not realize he was doing it. "Nonna," Paulie said gently, "we need to talk to you about something important, and we need you to tell us the truth." Her face went pale. "About what?" "About Detective Brennan." The name hung in the air like smoke. Elena's hands froze, her eyes widened. For a moment she said nothing. Then, quietly, "How do you know about him?" "We know," Paulie said. "That is all that matters. What we need to know is what you told him, what you discussed, everything." Eleanor looked between her grandsons, and something crumbled in her face. "I did not mean to put you in danger. I swear I only wanted to understand." "Understand what?" Dominic asked, his voice breaking. "What you had become." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I am not stupid, boys. I am old, but I am not blind. The money, the late nights, the phone calls you take in other rooms, the way you move now, always watching, always tense, the rings you wear that you never take off." She reached across the table and grabbed Paulie's hand, turning it to show the gold band with its crest. "I know what this is. I know what it means. Your grandfather wore one just like it before he died." The revelation struck Paulie like a physical blow. "Grandfather was a soldier," Elena whispered. "Just like you. He served a different Don in a different time. It killed him, not with a bullet but slowly from the inside. The guilt, the fear, the things he had to do. By the end, he was not the man I married. He was a ghost wearing my husband's face." She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "When I saw you putting on those rings, when I saw that look in your eyes, I knew. I knew I had saved you from one death only to deliver you into another. So I went to the church to pray, to ask God for guidance. And Detective Brennan was there. He knew who I was. He knew about you. He approached me." "What did you tell him?" Paulie asked, his voice barely audible. "Nothing," Elena said firmly. "Nothing. He asked if you worked for the Don. I said I did not know what he was talking about. He asked if I had seen anything suspicious. I said no. He gave me his card and told me that if I ever wanted to help my grandsons escape, he could offer protection. Witness protection. New identities. A new life for all of us." She pulled a business card from her apron pocket and placed it on the table. "Detective Thomas Brennan," a phone number written in ink on the back. "I kept it," she continued. "Not because I planned to call, but because I needed to know there was a door, a way out if things became unbearable. But I never used it. I never told him anything. You have to believe me." Paulie believed her. He could see the truth in her eyes, hear it in her voice. But belief would not save them. The Don did not forgive potential threats. The fact that Elena had been approached, that she possessed a detective's card, that she knew the truth, was enough to condemn her. "Nonna," Dominic said, his voice thick with tears, "you need to give us the card. And you need to promise us you will never contact him, never go back to that church, never speak to any police about anything. Can you do that?" "Of course," Elena said. "I would never endanger you. Never." Paulie took the card and slipped it into his pocket. "We have to report this to our employers. They know about the meetings. They will want to hear what happened." "Will I be in trouble?" Eleanor asked, fear creeping into her voice. "No," Paulie lied, the word ashes on his tongue. "But we need to be honest with them. Show them we have nothing to hide." They stayed with her for another hour, drinking tea, pretending normalcy while the world collapsed around them. When they finally left, Eleanor hugged them both tightly, and Paulie memorized the feeling, knowing it might be the last time. Outside, in the falling snow, the brothers walked in silence until they reached a payphone. Paulie dialed the number Marco had given them for emergencies. "It is me," he said when Marco answered. "We talked to her. She has not said anything to the detective. He approached her, but she refused. She kept his card, but never used it. She knows what we do, but she will not speak about it." Marco was silent for a long moment. "Where is she now?" "Home. Alone. And the card. I have it. Bring it to the mansion. Tonight. Both of you." The line went dead. They stood in the snow, watching their breath cloud in the freezing air. Paulie pulled out Detective Brennan's card and stared at the phone number written on the back. A door. A way out. Everything their grandmother had been too afraid or too loyal to use. "We could call him," Dominic whispered. "Right now. Take Nonna and disappear. New names, new lives, away from all of this." Paulie thought about it. Imagined running. Imagined spending the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, waiting for the day the Don's reach finally found them. Imagined Elena living in fear, ripped from everything she knew, dying among strangers in a place that would never be home. "They would find us," he said quietly. "Eventually. And when they did, it would be worse. For all of us. So what do we do?" Paulie closed his hand around the card, feeling its edges bite into his palm. "We go to the mansion. We tell the truth. And we beg for mercy. Will he give it? I do not know." The drive to the mansion felt like traveling to their own funeral. The gates opened silently. The house loomed before them, beautiful and terrible. Marco waited at the door, his face unreadable. "The Don is expecting you," he said. "Library." They walked the familiar path for what might be the last time. The library was warm, the fire bright. The Don sat behind his desk, Giuliano standing beside him like a pale angel of death. Neither man spoke as the brothers entered and sat. Paulie placed the business card on the desk. She never called him, never told him anything. He approached her, gave her this. She kept it but did not use it. "She knows what we are, but she will stay silent. You have my word." The Don picked up the card, studying it. "Your word, the word of a soldier who has been lying to his grandmother for 6 months. "I lied to protect her," Paulie said, "just as you told me to, just as you told me protecting her was mercy." "And now she knows the truth," Giuliano said, "which makes her a liability." "A conscience is a dangerous thing, Paulie. It makes people do unpredictable things. Your grandmother may be loyal today, but what about tomorrow, when guilt becomes unbearable? What about next week, when she wakes from a nightmare about what you have become?" "She will stay silent," Dominic said desperately. "She loves us. She would never—" "Love is not reliability," the Don interrupted. "Love is not safety. I have seen mothers betray sons, wives betray husbands, all because love twisted into something that demanded confession." He stood and moved to the fire, staring into the flames. The silence stretched, unbearable. Finally, he spoke. "There is a solution. It is not pleasant, but it is necessary. Your grandmother must leave the city. Not permanently, just for a time. 6 months, perhaps a year. She will go to her sister in Philadelphia. She will tell Detective Brennan, if he approaches her again, that her grandson's moved away for work. She will cut all contact with him. She will live quietly, comfortably. The monthly payments will continue. When enough time has passed, when Brennan has moved on to other cases, she may return." Paulie felt something loosen in his chest. Not freedom, but reprieve. "She will agree. I will make sure of it." "She will agree," the Don said, "because the alternative is unthinkable. Make her understand this, Paulie. Not with threats, but with truth. She must leave, or all 3 of you will be lost. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good." The Don returned to his desk. "You have 1 week to arrange it. After that, if she is still in the city, the decision is out of my hands." They left the mansion and went directly back to Elena's apartment. It was after midnight now, but the lights were still on. She opened the door at their knock, her face tight with worry. "What happened?" she asked. Paulie told her everything. Not the lies, not the careful fiction, but the truth. What they did, what they had become, what the Don had said, what would happen if she stayed. Elena listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. When he finished, she sat at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. "I did this," she whispered. "I sold everything to save you, and I delivered you to hell." "No," Dominic said, kneeling beside her. "We did this. We borrowed money we could not repay. We made the choices that led here. You tried to save us. That is all you have ever done. And now I must leave." "Just for a while," Paulie said. "Your sister has been asking you to visit for years. Go to Philadelphia. Live with her, rest, be safe. We will send money, we will call. And when enough time has passed, you can come home. And if I refuse—" The question hung in the air. Paulie could not answer it honestly. Could not tell her that refusal meant death, not just for her but for all of them. "Please," he said instead, "trust us one more time. Let us protect you the way you protected us." Elena looked at her grandsons, these men she had raised, these strangers wearing familiar faces. She saw what they had become. She saw what it was costing them, and she saw that despite everything, they still loved her. "I will go," she said quietly. "For you, I will go." 5 days later, they put her on a bus to Philadelphia with 2 suitcases and a promise that she would be cared for. She hugged them both at the station, holding on as though afraid to let go. "Come back to me," she whispered. "However you can, whatever you have become, find your way back." "We will try," Paulie promised, knowing it was a lie. They watched the bus pull away, carrying their grandmother into safety and exile. When it disappeared around a corner, Dominic turned to his brother. "What now?" Paulie touched the ring on his finger, feeling its weight. "Now we keep working, keep serving, keep surviving. For how long? Until we cannot anymore." The months that followed were harder without Elena's apartment as a refuge, without her Sunday dinners and her worried questions and her prayers. They rented a small place in Queens, closer to their territories, closer to the work. They saw each other in passing, ships in the night, bound to the same organization but moving in different currents. The Dons seemed satisfied with how they had handled the situation. The monthly payments to Elena continued, sent to Philadelphia now. Detective Brennan eventually gave up, moved on to other cases. The threat passed, but something had been lost, some essential piece of themselves that they could not name. They performed their duties with increasing skill. They rose through the ranks. Paulie became a capo at 26, the youngest in the family's history. Dominic became his underboss a year later. They accumulated power and money and respect. They forgot, slowly, what they had been before the rings, before the collections, before the night an old woman had knocked on the Don's door and traded everything she owned for mercy that was not mercy at all, but transformation disguised as salvation. 10 years passed, then 15. Eleanor returned to the city briefly, but found it changed, found her grandsons changed. She stayed 3 months before returning to Philadelphia permanently, unable to bear the strangers who wore her grandsons' faces. 20 years after that first night, Paulie stood in the library of the mansion, older now, harder, waiting for the Don to finish writing in his ledger. The Don was older too, his silver hair gone white, his elegant hands spotted with age, but his eyes remained sharp, patient, inevitable. "Paulie," he said, looking up, "I have been reviewing my records. Do you know what I discovered?" "No, Don. 20 years ago, you came to me with a debt of $28,000. A pittance, really. In the time since, you have earned this family millions. You have eliminated threats. You have expanded territories. You have proven yourself invaluable." He closed the ledger. "The debt has been repaid many times over." Paulie said nothing, waiting. "And yet," the Don continued, "you still wear the ring. You still serve. Why?" The question was genuine. Paulie considered his answer carefully. "Because there is nowhere else to go," he said finally. "Because this is what I am now. Because leaving would mean admitting that everything we did, everything we became, was for nothing." The Don nodded slowly. "That is the true price of the life we lead. Not the violence, not the danger, but the impossibility of return. We transform to survive, and in transforming, we lose the ability to be what we were." He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the grounds. "Your grandmother understood this. That is why she left, not because she feared for her safety, but because she could not bear to watch what you were becoming. She knew the truth. Some debts can never be repaid. They can only be carried until they consume you entirely." Paulie felt something crack inside him. "Then why did you let us in, if you knew what it would cost?" The Don turned, and in his eyes was something Paulie had never seen before. Sadness. "Because that is what I am, Paulie. I am the door that opens when all other doors have closed. I am the mercy that destroys. I am the shadow that offers power at the price of the soul. And men will always knock on my door, no matter the cost, because survival means more to them than salvation." He returned to his desk and sat. "You are dismissed. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow there will be more work. There is always more work." Paulie left the mansion and drove through the city, past neighborhoods he had collected from, past buildings where men had disappeared, past the apartment where his grandmother once lived. He parked outside and climbed the stairs to find new tenants, new lives, no trace of the woman who had sacrificed everything. He drove to his own apartment, expensive now, filled with things he did not need. Dominic was there, waiting, drinking whiskey and staring at nothing. They sat together in silence, wearing their rings, carrying their secrets, two men who had sold everything to survive and discovered that survival was its own form of death. And somewhere, in Philadelphia, an old woman said her prayers and wept for the grandsons she had lost, not to violence or betrayal, but to the mercy that had saved them. The mercy that had cost them everything they were and left them with nothing but what they had become, shadows wearing human faces, bound forever to a family they had not chosen, serving a Don they could not escape, living lives that had ended the moment they walked into that library 20 years ago and accepted rings they could never remove. Some debts, Elena had learned too late, cannot be paid with money. They can only be paid with everything you are, until nothing remains but the shadow of what you might have been, walking through a world that no longer recognizes you as human. And in the ledger of the Don, two names remained in the column marked invested, because investment never ends. It only compounds year after year until the interest becomes the principal, and the principal becomes your entire existence, and you can no longer remember what you mortgaged to acquire it, only that it was everything and it was never enough.